Welcome to Makeready. I'm Tom Eichmans.
And I'm Jamie Yen. And we are thrilled to have you here today for this first weekend of Makeready, the first official program of the Seattle Art Book Fair.
We'd like to just take a moment real quick. And even though this is a virtual event, we want to acknowledge that the Seattle Art Book Fair and Makeready were both organized on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, and specifically the Duwamish tribe. We're grateful to and honor these communities past, present, and future.
So just a little bit of background. The Seattle Art Book Fair was founded in 2019 with the expectations of launching our first fair in spring 2020, but we all know how that went.
But while we wait for our in-person fair to take place, hopefully next spring 2022, so save the date for sometime that season to be determined, we decided to put together Makeready, which is a 3-part virtual program that features artists, designers, printers, and publishers all sharing the process of making an art book from start to finish. You've noticed by now that each weekend has a distinct theme: before a book, making a book, and after a book.
We hope folks come away from these sessions seeing books and publishing in a different way, and hope folks are excited to connect with other bookmakers and book lovers, and are maybe inspired to start new publishing projects of their own.
The question we hear a lot is, what is an art book exactly? And there are a lot of answers to this question, but none of them are exactly wrong either. Art books are kind of a broad category of publications by artists, designers, makers, and creators that reflect on books as a medium in themselves, and also publishing as an artistic practice.
Art books often combine content, form, and materials in thoughtful ways that push the possibilities of what books can be. The artists, designers, printers, and publishers these next few weekends offer different ways to think about what falls under the very wide umbrella of art books and what you might see represented at an art book fair.
So for this first weekend, well, in general, each weekend begins with a panel discussion on Friday, which is what's happening right now as I'm speaking, followed by a full lineup on Saturdays of studio visits, workshops, and office hours. Tickets for each event are available right up until an hour before the event begins, but all event passes are available until the very last day. And of course, everything's free.
So this first weekend of Makeready is about everything that happens as a book project is conceived. What inspires artists and designers to use this form? What about the form of the book lends itself to artistic and experimental expression? And for those who are new to the field, where should they look for inspiration, and what do they need to get started? So feel free to connect with other fairgoers as well and continue these conversations on our Discord server. And the link is there on the slide, and we'll put it in the chat as well.
Also, thank you to everyone who's donated to us through Give Big, to our advisors and to our volunteers that we've had, not just leading up to this event, but since the very beginning when we started planning this in 2019. Also to Short Run Comics and Arts Festival, which has been a great advisor along the way, and also an event hopefully to return soon.
Thank you also to Julia Powers for her assistance these next few weekends, helping us run Makeready, and to Hart Boyd, who's going to be helping us run the Discord.
Just a few kind of housekeeping notes. The session is being recorded and may be screen captured. So if you don't want to appear on video or in screenshots, feel free to turn off your camera or change your display name. Please be respectful to all participants' work and their time as well. Don't record or screenshot anything without notification or their consent. Also, please mute yourself while you're not speaking. Also, live captions are available. There's a live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen that you can turn on if they're not on already, which I just realized they're not.
And again, so save the date for an in-person Seattle Art Book Fair at Washington Hall in the Central District in Seattle in 2022. We are also going to share some more exciting news about other things that we're doing this year in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, please keep an eye on these announcements, and we hope you'll keep joining us these coming few weekends.
Today, we'd like to briefly introduce our panelists. Jeffrey is an award-winning children's book author and the creator of the Seattle Urban Book Expo. Jeff's also been a wonderful advisor to the Seattle Art Book Fair, going all the way back to the beginning as well. Chris Moody is founder of Horse Girl Press in Eugene, Oregon, which is a platform to publish zines about queerness, nature, and modern life. Ingrid Jindal started IS Projects, a public access printmaking and book art studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And Meshell Sturgis is an instructor and Ph.D. candidate in the Department of Communication at the University of Washington. And now that's all of our introductory remarks. So if you want to take it away, Jeffrey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Seattle Art Book Fair, for asking me to do this. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to be the the conductor of a good time tonight for everybody, talking about before a book, the creation of a story. And let's just get rocking and rolling. So a little bit about myself. As it was mentioned before, I'm the creator of the Seattle Urban Book Expo. Our goal is to provide a platform for Black and Brown authors to showcase their works for the community in Seattle. Seattle is always in the top 10 of literacy, but it's always in the bottom 10 of representation and diversity and inclusion. And what the Seattle Urban Book Expo wants to do is be an ally to all those authors who feel like their voices are not heard, to be heard. I created it back in 2016. We had a book fair at Black Dot, which was on 24th and Union in the Central District. And ever since, we've been growing and growing to have a national appeal to all POC, BIPOC authors around the country, and some in Canada, to have a platform to showcase their stories. I am so thrilled to be on this panel because, first of all, this is my first time meeting everyone, Chris, Meshell, Ingrid. So I'm very excited to learn more about these wonderful people and what they do and why they're doing it. So enough about me. I'm going to get rocking and rolling with the real superstars of this panel. And I'm going to go in alphabetical order here. Chris, how's it going, Chris?
Hey there.
So, Chris, so the question I want to start off with you is, why do you zine?
I zine for a lot of reasons, and I've been thinking back to it now, and like I used to really love writing when I was like in second grade. And I made zines back then, but I didn't know that I was making zines. But now, I don't know, there's just so much art, and zines can like be all the art in one, and that's kind of what's made me like continue to keep making zines. It can be anything really, as long as it's printable.
Exactly. And for people who don't know, like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm unfamiliar with the art form though, a zine. What's the difference between a zine and, you know, like a comic or a graphic novel or a book? What's the difference between the mediums compared to zines?
Yeah, zines, like I said, it can be kind of anything. Comics are kind of restricted to that same kind of style. I mean, there's always different styles within that too, but you know, zine can be poetry, it can be photography, it can be a rant, it can be political stuff. I always just see it as like a self-published like form of a magazine. There's like no ads, the person's just creating it on their own. But there's all different kinds of variations of zines. There are some with ads in them, so.
All right,
paper.
awesome. Your paper, paper. Is that what motivated you to create Horse Girl? So that way you can have control over what you put out.
Totally. Yeah, I used to submit to a lot of zines. And then, the main thing is like kind of having access to a printer. If you can do it yourself, it's way cheaper than like using a publisher. And that's the cool thing about zines, is you can just do it all on your own time, whatever you want in there. There's no like censorship really. Like you can kind of put your own stuff out there if you want to. But so mentioned a little bit about like kind of just all these different kinds of art and having access to a printer. So I didn't actually have my own printer when I started Horse Girl Press. I was kind of just actually making the zine with my hands and like smearing ink and drawing and stuff like that. But then I finally got access to a printer. And then I was like, okay, yeah, Horse Girl Press, I can make all this stuff. And that was in 2015. And so I've kind of just been, flowing with one thing here and then flowing with another thing there. My zines started out mostly photography based, aside from that one like text and drawing and pen. But now I've kind of moved around and I don't do that many photo zines, but I don't know. Everything comes in waves. But yeah, I've been doing Horse Girl Press for 5 years now. Currently based here in Oregon, but move around a lot. Zine fests are always super fun and like a great way to meet people, and art book fairs too, not just the zine fairs. But yeah, not sure where I want to go with that.
So I have a quick one. So the name Horse Girl, where did that come from?
So I grew up in a very small town in Texas, and there's the whole like cowboy thing. I'm also queer myself, and I've always like had a lot of like female like put downs on me. But I've also just like loved the term girl, even though I've been made fun of for that for a lot of my life. But so it's kind of reclaiming that, but also like not just a cowboy, there's horse girls. I don't know why it stuck. It just like stuck with me. I was like, yeah, I'm a country girl. I love horses. And I've had some people at zine fairs be like, Horse Girl Press, but this isn't all about horses. But yeah, it's not. It's just kind of, I don't know, a fun name, and it stuck. I liked it.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you've hosted fairs,
Mhm.
Horse Girl Press fairs. So what are those fairs like, and how long have you been doing those?
I've been doing fairs. I've been going to them before I started like making Horse Girl Press. And those are super fun, like especially the big ones. But it's crazy. I mean, there's so many people from so many different like backgrounds. Everyone has their own different art practice, and you're all in this one like small gymnasium or a zine tent, or I don't know, it just cramps together all these people from all these different places. And funny thing too, Ingrid and I met years ago at the Miami Zine Fair. And it's kind of cool that here we are years later on a virtual panel. But it just like it's just a huge gathering of people wanting to like look and see all these different kinds of art and see the human experience. It's a cool thing. Zine fairs are great. And for anyone who hasn't been, but Seattle Art Book Fair is going to be their first, I'm excited for y'all.
Absolutely. Oh, well, hopefully you can make it up here.
Oh, I'll be
so
up there. If it'll happen, I
Okay.
will be there.
All right, because you owe me an air high five, so we got to make that work. Yeah, there you go. Uh, so the last question to you before I get to Ingrid. So I told you before we start recording that one of my favorite photo galleries that you have on your website is Once Upon a Dream. And for anybody who hasn't done it yet, check out Chris Moody's website. I think the website is in the chat for everyone to click on. And I did say I'm a big fan of Stranger Things off of Netflix, and two of your photos and Once Upon a Time in a Dream reminded me of the Upside Down. All my Stranger Things people know what I'm talking about. So when you take the photos, this is going to sound strange, but it's okay. What is your muse? Like, what's your inspiration for the photos that you take?
So for a while, it was like pure nature, no human like touch, even though like maybe it had been manipulated by humans, you like couldn't tell. Um, and so for that series in particular, that was like a big focus on it. It was just like the epic like eeriness of nature. And that one was a lot about moving to Oregon from Texas and like leaving the dry land behind and like being in this like super moist, wet, foggy, mountainous area. And so those kind of all have that like almost jungle feel, but just like intense nature. So for that series, it was definitely just like nature in its rawest form. Um, but that's kind of changed, and like that the zines I started out making were mostly that kind of material, like those kinds of photos. So for that time period, I would say like nature and no humans were my muse, but now human existence is definitely like I'm like, okay, I'm a human. I'm gonna delve into this a little more.
So today's time must be perfect for you right now. Then there's no human at all. You can enjoy everything during this time period.
Yeah, I do like isolating a little bit.
That is awesome. Yeah, so please everyone check out Chris's website and check out the photos. It's a lot of great stuff. With when I looked at your pictures, I never think about going out in nature and enjoying it, but every single time that I do take a walk, like around a fall or something like that, I love it. And your pictures, like from what I've seen, even though it's been like a brief time that I've been made aware of you, your pictures automatically make me want to go take walks
Nice.
in part. So it's really, I could tell the emotional connection that you have with your pictures, man. It's really cool. Really, really cool. Really, really cool.
Thanks.
Awesome. So Ingrid Jindal, Ingrid Jindal. So before I barrage you with questions, tell everybody about yourself.
Totally. Yeah. Well, sometimes it's a little easier to see and talk at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and give my screen a little share here so you guys can see what we're talking about. Let's see. Can everyone see that? We're good? Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So my name is Ingrid Jindal. I have been in the book world since probably about like 2008, 2009. So over 10 years, but professionally, I've had my studio down here in South Florida for coming up on 7 years in September. Very exciting. I started Nocturnal Press just sort of out of my living room in Baltimore after graduating from the Maryland Institute College of Art. I went to MICA for printmaking and book art. So like, I really just I made my first lino cut in high school and literally never looked back. I was like, okay, that's what we're doing. Here we are. So I started getting into book arts in college. I just thought it was cool that, you could make a book with your hands, that was just like a wild concept. So after graduating, I got offered to visit David Kroop projects in South Africa. And I worked there as a collaborative bookbinder, and I was doing some assisted screen printing or printmaking there. So I taught a bookmaking workshop. I worked on a collaborative fine art pop-up book with Stephen Hobbs, and I printed some editions of Senzo Shibanga. You can see in the bottom left corner, those are the Senzo's Nelson Mandela prints, and that's actually Senzo up in the top left corner there. So that experience was really awesome to be sort of lead collaborator and be able to make an artist book sort of from start to end in 3 months, which was kind of a bananas time frame, but was also really a fun challenge. So when I got back to the States, I started a little studio in Baltimore. I was calling it Nocturnal Press at the time because I would stay awake all night before fairs, sewing books and sort of like crying, and then, being like, oh, what if I run out of books? And then I never ran out of books. So we've taken a much more calm approach to books from now on, but it was a good way to start. And so I had my little studio in Fort Lauderdale, It's grown quite a bit. Now we have screen printing, we do workshops, we do all sorts of fun things. We have artist residencies, gallery space. We do, like I said, workshops, classes, instruction, private instruction. We also still run Nocturnal Press. So now the studio is called IS Project. It's the big umbrella. Nocturnal Press sort of lives within it. Nocturnal Press is commission printing, book binding, fine binding. We specialize in letterpress and screen printing, do a bunch of stuff there. In 2015, I started a program called Existent Books, which is an artist's book publishing program where we invite artists from around South Florida into the studio to experience the different things that we have to offer. And every year we bring 1 or 2 artists in and we work with them to come to a completed sort of artist's book, and then the studio publishes it. Our residency will begin actually in mid-June this year, so we're very excited. We have Carol Prusa and Aaliyah Khalaf will be joining us, but we've worked with 9 artists so far, so it's been going for a while, and we've had a lot of fun. All of the books are completely handmade here in the studio, using the different techniques that we specialize in: letterpress, screen printing, fine binding, interesting structures and things like that. The artists that we work with, some of them are, familiar with book arts as a medium, but a lot of them, they work in other media, mostly a lot of painters, sculptors, performance, installation, video. And actually, when we worked with Jen Clay, I asked if she would want to be a part of this project, and she said, "Man, I haven't worked on paper since undergrad. Like, I don't even know what I would do." And she's a video installation, fiber, and performance artist. And I said to think of the book as a personal performative object, because that's really what you're asking of your viewer, is to sort of interact while this book performs. And so the book that we wound up making sort of acted like a little stage, which was a prelude to one of her performances that she had later on that year with a big costume and setup and projections and all of these things. So I work with the artists to sort of channel their typical practices through the artist book medium, and then we publish the books, we get them into collections, we bring them to fairs, and have a lot of fun nerding out with folks who know what they're talking about, and introducing people who don't know. They're always really fun, different things. There's Jen's book in the bottom middle there. These are our early editions. Top left is Edwin Beauchamp, who is a Miami-based illustrator. We've got Beth Sheehan, who's actually in Tuscaloosa now. On the top middle, we've got Brian Butler, who is a Miami-based illustrator from Boston. We've got Noah Levy, who is a sort of halfway between Miami and New York. He did Swap Shop, which was a super fun ode to the Fort Lauderdale Swap Shop. If y'all haven't heard of it, it's wild. Check it out. The guy who owns it, he just passed away recently, but he collects Ferraris. It's like anyways, it's incredible. We've got Jen Clay's Nearing, Elisa Batista's Textual, and then our most recent editions, we did this wild accordion book with Christian Fennick, which is the top left and the top middle. We did this really fun round book with Michelle Miller called Convergence that had a 3D printed slipcase that was really fun to work on. And Antilian Lakunai with Onajie Shabaka, which is a 6-inch by 12-inch, like a long format, really beautiful book that combines photography, writing, his sort of drawn language and imagery, all into this really beautiful book. And so the other thing that I found is that, when you are into bookmaking, maybe you go off the deep end like me and you start a small press fair called SPF South Florida, which, anyone who's interested in coming away from the gloomy Pacific Northwest and having a vacation in the muggy and hot and wild South Florida sometime in the future, we will be resuming SPF in person this year, November. It'll be November 14th. We have a big old warehouse, lots of room for everybody to spread out. You can check it out on Instagram, SPFFTL. And the other thing that we're starting, which will be March 2022, is Traffic Bound Artist Book Fair, which will be a biennial artist book fair with Sarah Michelle Rupert and Christina Fabretto of University of Miami Special Collections. And that's going to be sort of a 4-day, like really big, fantastic event in the Miami Design District. And it's going to be lots of fun. So sorry, I can go on forever, but I would rather have a good chat with you. So any questions you have, I can answer.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it. I was writing down notes. I'm about to call you in the future. Anyway, so you said you started Nocturnal Press in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
So what led to, if you don't mind sharing, what led from the trip from Baltimore down to Florida?
Great question. So I'm actually originally from South Florida. I was born and raised in
Oh.
Delray Beach, in Palm Beach here, and I went to school in Baltimore. I stayed there for a couple of years after graduating. And you know what? Winter really didn't work for me. And South Florida was a place that didn't have a lot of printmaking resources. And I just so happened to be really good at finding presses, like this one you can see in the back here. And accumulating sort of equipment and space. So I came down here, opened up my studio IS projects in 2014 and opened our doors pretty much immediately to artists to come and work and collaborate and learn.
So yeah, so when you were telling all of us, first of all, thank you for sharing yourself and sharing what you do. It's awesome. When you were talking about your journey in the industry, it's very people centric. It's almost as if you're doing it as a service more than a business. And I want to know, and I'm curious to know, where does that come from, where you really focus on developing community and people with the work that you do?
Well, so our mission statement at the studio is to inspire a love of paper, ink, and craft in current and future generations. My artist practice personally has always been to inspire sort of an interest in paper, ink, and craft. And so building the community and publishing, I see as a very integral part of my personal artistic practice. It's one of those topics that's a little bit debated right now, is like, can publishing be practice and can community building be artistic practice? It's really difficult to write grants for these types of things because they don't have that category in there. But it is, for me, it is the thing that fills my glass, is getting people excited. I mean, we have a huge 5,000 square foot studio, and every time people walk through, they get to learn more about printing history, how things are actually made, and ideally, get a spark for something that interests them and will stick with them.
Awesome. So outside of the educational journey you had to take in order to become a printer, where did the inspiration come from to get into printing exactly?
I mentioned it super briefly. I know I'm like talking at a million miles an hour, and I promise I will slow down now. I just have a lot to say, and I'm very excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me, by the way, super excited. I took art classes in high school. I was always into drawing. I took art classes. I think it was my junior year. My art teacher had us do lino cuts and screen prints and things like that. And I mean, it really was, I carved my first lino cut. I printed it directly into my sketchbook because I thought that would be so cool. Not super easy for registration, but it got me going. And really, truly, I never looked back, sort of like, okay, well, now I don't have to worry about what I want to do. I just have to figure out how to do this. So I went to a summer pre-college program at the California College of Arts. I received a scholarship to go and check it out. So I was in San Francisco for a month doing printmaking and illustration. And I got there and sort of like, I don't know if I could be a printmaking major. Those printmaking majors at CCA are so, they're clean, they're polished, they're like very organized. And I was like a total, high school mess. And I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore because the print shop was amazing. I mean, it's a really fantastic studio, and it's only gotten better since then. They've moved into a new building. It's like 3 times the size. It's just like total printmaking heaven. And so I went there and, sort of like, well, I can't really do anything else other than printmaking and be here, can I? So I stuck with it.
That's so cool, man. So there's one story I want to hear more about, the trip you took to South Africa. How did that come about?
Basically just me being a total busybody, I guess. So when I was at the Maryland Institute College of Art, my senior year, I was asked to be the Globe Collection and Press and the Dolphin Press and Print coordinator. So I was in charge of a collaboration that we did with Trent and Doyle Hancock. So we did a collaborative poster for the Baltimore Museum of Art print fair, and we did a benefit print for the Baltimore Museum of Art. And so as the sort of, student who was coordinating the whole thing, I was at the Baltimore Museum of Art print fair selling the prints and getting people excited about them. And I met David Crute. He came over to talk to my instructor, and he was like, Gail, you should really send some of your students down to South Africa. And I just so happened to be standing right there, and I was like, I'll go. Got his email address and emailed him probably like once a month, every month for about 7 months. And then I was in South Africa, and it was great.
Awesome. And how long was that? The trip was you said one? No. How long was the trip in South Africa once you went?
3 months. That's how long you can get a vacation visa for. So I was there for like 3 months to the day. And it was wild because we put the pop-up book together on that last day, and I sort of wrapped it in cardboard and strapped like my copy. I took my copy, wrapped it in cardboard, stuffed it in my backpack, and hoped that it would dry flat.
So what? So about the South African trip, what did you take away from that experience that you now apply to your business now? Because 3 months inside, like a lot, a lot of history, and like from the locals, everybody else. So what about that experience made you feel like, okay, I'm gonna do this exact thing once I get my stuff up and running?
Well, I really wanted to, it solidified that I really want to spend my time around artists collaborating. When I was in MICA still, we were collaborating with Trent and Doyle Hancock. When I graduated, I got to work with, in South Africa, I got to work with Senzo, Stephen. I was hoping to work with Nandipa and Tambo, but she was not able to work. There was a few other people that came through the studio that I was helping, and it really, made me see that like working collaboratively is where I, get into the flow. There's a lot of like talk going on right now about like finding the thing that puts you in a state of flow. And that's what it is for me. I love problem solving. I love listening to people's ideas and helping them find a way to convey those ideas through the mediums that I've spent, my entire career getting really comfortable and really fluent in. And so that's really what makes me want to keep doing what I do.
Awesome. So quick question is, did you document that trip?
Oh yeah, lots of pictures. That's a good one.
All right. Awesome. All right, cool. All right. Yeah, memories like that. Like, I think the most valuable thing that any person can own is their memories. Because if you always have positive, great experiences that leave an impact on your soul, it always puts you in a great space because it reminds you of the potential that you can have to be a great human being. And like, obviously, I want to go to South Africa. That's why I'm actually going to speak about South Africa, because I'm fascinated. So thank you for sharing that story with me. All right. Book printing. So I'm a self-published children's book author, and I got started in 2012, and I didn't know anything at all about self-publishing. And one of the major points was, of course, printing. In 2012, I know it's not that long ago, but it seems like a lifetime ago, self-publishing wasn't where it is right now, where self-publishing is a legitimate industry that's recognized by everybody. How has the changes or the ascension of self-publishing affected your business, good or bad?
I do a lot of printing and binding for people who are self-publishing. I think there's a really fuzzy, weird line between like sort of making an artist book or a zine and self-publishing. I think in some ways there's like, a different sort of aura that can be around sort of more of the written word versus more of the artistic endeavors, like in visually artistic endeavors. So I do mostly work with artists specifically who are working in some type of visual medium. We are actually binding right now in the back of the studio. There is a stack of 30 poetry books that we're binding for a first-time self-publishing poet. It's actually a really exciting book. Some really interesting design choices made in the presentation of the texts and things like that. So, I mean, in the last 7 years, I would say, I don't know if it's just that more people know about my studio, but we've definitely seen an increase in self-publishing artists and writers and poets.
So when you first work with a self-published author, what's one of the things you want them to know before they come in, as far as like working with you with regarding printing and pressing their books, that would make it easier for them to work with?
Yeah, I mean, we are a fine art shop, so we do hand binding here. So this is not the place really to come if you're going to do, perfect bound magazines and you need 250, 500, 1,000 of them. This is the place to come for your sort of special edition, something that's going to be a little bit more commemorative and live on, shelves in a proud area type of thing. So, I think that there are lots of options out there for people who want to do, more of get it in people's hands, find a lot of them, and there's a lot of different options for that. But really doing good research on, the place that you're going to work with and what they specialize in can help make those conversations go smoother and faster, for sure.
Cool. Yeah. Because the reason why I was asking that is being in Seattle, when I first got started, I didn't have any mentors or resources to go to. I was completely DIY. And at that time, printing companies didn't print books at all. So I had to go through the self-publishing route through, Outskirts Press, Create Space, where it's the whole print on demand. So what I'm saying is I wish you were here in Seattle. It would make my life a lot easier.
Come
I will visit.
It's a great place to vacation. I'm gonna, if I do say so myself.
Right. You got 5,000 square feet. That's plenty of places for air high fives. So I owe you one too. So with Tropic.
Oh, maybe a technical glitch. Jeffrey, are you still there? Oh,
Hello.
oh, there you are. There you are.
Hey.
The internet was hating off Tropic Bound. So the other, I forgot. I'm sorry, Tropic Bound. And what was the name of the other book fair that you?
SPF South Florida.
SPF South Florida. Is there a difference between like those two book fairs? Like, is there different energy? All right. So what's the difference between the two?
So SPF is a place for anyone who makes multiples on paper. That includes prints, books, zines, anything that sort of falls into that sort of big category. It's very, very open, very family friendly. We do print demos. We do a steamroller printing down the street. In front of it, we have 2 huge warehouses where everyone can set up. And we also do, a tour of the studio so everyone can see, like, this is how some of these things get made. Tropic Bound is an artist's book fair, so it's specializing in artists' books specifically, which are books that are made by hand, often by the artists themselves, and they're books where the book is art and the art is a book. So it's book objects, it's anything that sort of falls into that category, typically more on the fine art end of things. And more into the status of objecthood a lot of the time. And that is going to be a 4-day fair. So it's a big, big fair with a symposium, panelists, keynote speakers, breakout sessions, and all of that, along with, artists from all over the country and hopefully internationally.
Okay. Will there be wine?
Oh, You know.
Okay. All right. You gotta get to the important stuff. So I appreciate
And there
it.
will be beer at
So-
SPF, so that maybe that explains the vibe in an even easier way.
There you go. There you go. So I'm a big fan, Ingrid, of your YouTube, the video on your website. It's I'm a developing theater geek. And when the video, well, by the way, everyone check out isprojects.com.
FL.com, like Florida.
FL.com, sorry. Yeah, isprojectsfl.com. The video asks a very profound question. If not here, where? And I think it's magical. Like I was expecting someone dressed as in a Phantom of the Opera outfit to ask that question at the end of that video with the classical music. It's amazing, well done. And I already wrote down your information. I'll be contacting you as well. So this is super cool, man. Chris, Ingrid, and now let me get to Meshell Sturgis.
Hello.
Hello. So before barrage you with questions, Meshell, has anybody made fun of your name because of the movie Dodgeball?
Okay, yes. There's Dodgeball, and also in Hancock, the movie Hancock, the bully is also
Yeah.
Meshell. But no, usually I get the Beatles song reference.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's what I usually
Well, on behalf of all the stupid bullies, I apologize for the bullying of your name. So, like I said, Meshell, before I barrage you with questions, tell us about yourself.
Okay, yes. So I made a presentation, which I'm happy to share. And I am coming from the scholarly world. So I'm actually looking forward to keeping it really short and avoiding all the words. Let's see here if I can pull it up. Okay, can you see it? Can you see my speaker notes?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. Usually there's a little box that says what you can see, but it's not there. Okay, so I came to art books and artist books. My sorority sister, Danielle Dickerson, she got her MFA at Otis College of Art and Design. And while helping her move out of her apartment in California, I got to watch her in the studio while she was making her final, which is called Invisibly Wounded Adult-Sized Children. And then I met Danielle at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill for my undergrad, where I got a major in English and creative writing. And in creative writing, you know, they had two tracks. They had the poetry track and they had the fiction track. And then there like the option to kind of mix things together. So I started out on the poetry track because I knew I was a poet, you know. But there was one day, it was like the last day of class, and the professor went around to each person and gave public critique of their work over the course of the semester. And when he got to me, he said, try fiction. And I was really offended by that, just primarily because I was writing truths in my poetry. But so I went on the fiction track and learned a lot about writing short stories, but still felt really unfulfilled. And it was my final semester with Professor Michelle Robinson in an American Studies course on LGBTQ film, and she had us make a comic for our final. And I've been doing comics ever since. For my master's in cultural studies at the University of Washington, Bothell, I was really fortunate to take a class with Professor Amaranth Borsick, and that class was on making chapbooks. And so that was like, it was a dream. And I still open up my Canvas page and go back to that class to look at some of the resources she has shared with me. So yes, now I'm at the University of Washington, and I have been working on my studies for 4 years now. And yeah, so let me show you some pictures and tell you some things. And so a little bit about my research. So I look at how queer Black women strategically represent themselves in alternative media that they create using politicized femme aesthetics. So surveying comics, video art, independent publications, artist books, public art, and creative communities, my project analyzes the visual culture of Black girl magic. So it uses critical cultural communication and media studies to stage an interdisciplinary conversation between Black studies, critical mixed race studies, gender and sexuality studies, and the digital humanities. And this is all about the work of artists who speak across difference in the service of self-definition, social justice, and change. So as you can see from one of the artwork here on this page is coming from one of my chapters, which is kind of the focus for why I'm here at this roundtable. I use my own positionality as a starting point for mapping the mechanics of Black girl magic. I identify as a communication scholar because the state of the scholarly field itself reflects my own ways of being and knowing in the world. So within my scholarship, I practice communicating who I am, even if how I am me is constantly a shifting performance amidst a continuously evolving context. And just a little bit more about Black girl magic. I understand it as a quotidian performance that challenges intersectionally oppressive representations of Black women. And this is continually replicated throughout history. So understanding the grammars of media as, this is a term I think I'm coining, or I've heard it before, but I haven't heard people really go into it, which is onto-representational. And this means that the form of the media embodies its representational harm. So I then pivot to alternative media as opening up this sort of poetic channel for what I refer to as Afrofeminist critique. So in 5 different case studies of queer Black femme artists, and myself is one of them, I document how each utilizes visual strategies and aesthetic choices that can best be described through the metaphor of witchcraft. So picking up from Kara Keeling's explanation of The Witch's Flight from 2007, wherein Black femmes depart from the cinematic as an image of common sense and therefore subvert the political economy of racialized capitalism and patriarchy, I then describe 2 other key attributes of Black girl magic as brew and brood. So brew delves into the material craft of Black feminist poetics, and brood signifies the communities of creativity that foster such craft. So across these visualized speech acts, the flight, the brew, and the brood, I show how alternative media can afford a creative agency of the socially minoritized who speak across difference for self-definition. In doing so, they engage in dialogic exchanges that create co-constitutive ways of being as opposed to split or separate. And so looking at the aesthetics of Black girl magic, using methods such as textual analysis, research creation, which again is making my own artist book, curation and autoethnography, I explain how the split subject archetype points to the ways in which the embodied human experience is dialectically formed through communication. So this is how I've mapped my dissertation. There's a flight section, which is like all the boring, dry, academic stuff, textual analysis. And then the brew is really where I get to use my hands and experiment and learn through making. And then the brood really touches on what Ingrid was talking about, the being in community and how that in and of itself has this energy that brings art into the world. And for me, the questions that I'm thinking about while on this panel, which I really, really appreciate being here with you all. I'm like super excited, so I know I'm in the right place. Also a little intimidated though, right? Because it's like, okay, I need to make sure I stay in my lane, but obviously there's a lot of people to learn from here. These are the things that I'm thinking about. How do I write a dissertation as an artist book? So not only what does it mean to have an artist book as a chapter, but what does by creating several different components of the dissertation that branch out of what's traditional, how can I kind of make a meta commentary on how we produce knowledge in the academy? I'm also really thinking about what mediums and materials do I have and want to work with. So as Jeffrey was saying, the DIY, Like that is me all the way. Like there are a lot of inefficiencies in my work, and I also try to make space for that because that's where I'm at. And ultimately, how I'm theorizing things is I'm thinking about the architecture of artist books, and can they reveal to us something about the mechanics of being human. And when we take the queer Black woman, for example, as representative of human rather than the straight white male as it's been historically, how do we reimagine what it means to be human, and how do artist books in the ways that they challenge the conventional codex, how do they also similarly represent that to us? And then I can show you pictures, but I won't talk that much more because I said I wasn't going to do all the words, and then I did all the words because I had it written ahead of time. So I've been spending 4 years though, really meditating on my book. And there's a lot of things that have gone into making it. Studying with Dr. Kemi Adeyemi in the Gender, Women, Sexuality Studies Department, making comics, printing them using my terrible like printer over here on vellum, and assembling them with 2-stitch binding, playing with wax, a lot of wax, glitter, bubble gum, cellophane, ribbon, writing artist statements as I go, and also not just thinking about how to make it, but also what is it like when I break it down. And it's been an iterative process. So it actually started, the very first thing for the Witch Witch project that I made was the this tiny bell jar in the top right-hand corner. And I made that with Max over at Push Pull. And then it grew into a terrarium for snails that ended up not being so habitable for snails. And the latest iteration is actually, it's gone from these 23 chapbooks to 30 boxes. And within the boxes is just all kinds of goodies, more candles. The candles got smaller, but really playing with form, building community. I've spent some time at the IPRC in Portland, the Independent Publishing Resource Center, and they've been a really big resource for me as well. And I'm also in the Black Embodiment Studio, which has been teaching me a lot about Black arts and Black arts writing, and how the art and the critic kind of are in this, they engage in intellectual intimacy that's really important. And I'm probably pressed for time at this point. So I do have, can I just share one thing? It's like 22 seconds long, but I've also been thinking about what this looks like in the digital realm. So going through these iterations of the book, and then thinking about what would the book look like if I moved it into a digital media. And so I've been experimenting, like paying really close attention to the glitter and the shimmer, the cardboard, and the embossing that I've played with materials. And then this is through collaboration with Alan Daigle, who I met through the Society for Cinema and Media Studies. And then we took the cover of the book, and if this will play for us. Maybe it won't. Sometimes it takes a second. There we go. You should be able to hear it. Let me know.
Flesh is that ether, that shit that make your soul burn slow. Blackness points to a place where being undone is simultaneously a space for new forms of becoming. Scent of magnolias, sweet and fresh, then the sudden smell of burning flesh.
So I'll stop it there, but also just really excited to see who's in the crowd, and I've been thinking a lot about my own work, my own book in community with other books as well. And so there's been a lot of study in Special Collections Library, and taking stock of Black women book artists that are out there, and the stories that we're telling about what it means to be a Black woman in today's world. So thank you.
Wow. I have a lot of questions. So first, I can safely say that I do not need to ask you why you write, so we can skip past that. I do want to ask you about your poetry, um, your humble beginnings in poetry. Whoa, who or what were your inspirations at first when you first dived into being a poet?
Poetry, honestly, my inspirations was my anger at my mother as a young kid, right? And journaling, and really, I think in a lot of ways, maybe it sounds cheesy, right? But I feel like my writing was there for me when I was a teen in a very unhappy household situation in the Pacific Northwest where everyone's moody during the winter season. And so I think my writing really saved me in a lot of ways, but it was always very private. And so when I got to college, right, that was when I was like, well, I know I'm a poet, but like now I get to tell everybody else, and having to kind of move through that. But I will say that what I like about comics is when I would write before the writing that I did as a kid, and I have like a lot of books I write in my prologue to my dissertation project about the books that I made as a kid. And I'm fortunate to have some of them still. And so I know that bookmaking has been with me all along, and so has poetry. And I was doodling in my journal too, right? And drawing and communicating things there that I couldn't get out with the words. And so that's what I love about working with comics, is that there's a little bit of everything in there. There's the drawing. You have to be able to tell a story, and you have to do it in a very poetic way with the small amount of space that you have. So I would say, is that what you mean? Or you mean like formal poets out there that I like, Audrey?
Any inspiration, because inspiration comes in many different mediums. So
Yeah.
I was just want to know where did the artist in you, where did it come from? So however it came to you, that's how it came to you.
Yeah. I think I wrote somewhere, and I think I heard Toni Morrison. I used a little bit of Toni Morrison's language from the essay called Home, not the book, but the essay called Home. And it's in an edited collection. It's the first essay. And she said something like, would not, could not. And I feel like there was a little me who vowed with a furrowed brow that she would not, could not, dare not say what she needed to say. And so now I find ways, whether it's in a candle or it's in a book or it's in a comic, there's ways that I let what she didn't want out. I let it out, but it's kind of coded,
Yeah, absolutely. I got you. So your doctorate that you're pursuing.
Yeah.
Your soon to be Dr. Meshell Sturgis. What happened? What happened for you, to you, or around you that made you want to pursue your art to that level, to be known as doctor?
Yeah, so definitely Michelle Robinson's class. And I was so, I went 4 years, and she was the first Black woman that I had as a professor, and it was my final year, my final semester of study, and I found comics, and it was just like, I have to do more. That, and my like day job after graduating, and my boss looked at me and she said, "You make my brain hurt." And I was like, oh, maybe this isn't a place for me. I need to go back, and talking with folks earlier today, somebody had talked about this, and about not asking for permission. And so that's kind of how I got into it in my master's program. Was I just started submitting my art in place of assignments and not asking for permission, just kind of like, well, here's what I have. So, and it kept working. So I've just kind of stuck with that. Yeah.
Awesome. You made somebody's head hurt. That's perfect to be a doctor, apparently. So I know. Especially when the bill comes around, but that's medical doctor. But anyway, moving on. So the comics. So I wanted to dive into comics because when I looked up your website, you have probably two of the most awesome titles for comics that you won awards with. So in 2018, you won the Janice Ames and William Ames Diversity Award, and you won it, and apparently you won it with the title "The Ambiguous Penny Roll in Bitch Planet." Is that
Okay,
correct?
yes. So this was a paper that I had written
Okay.
about a comic by it's an image comic.
Oh,
Yes, by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Valentine DeLandro. And yes, in that one, I'm talking about the Penny Roll is this, she's represented as a fat woman. And I talk about the ways in which the comic panels punish her body for being big. So like literally there's like one scene where all the characters are in scene and she's actually beheaded by the comic panel. As though like, right, her body, even though it's being drawn, her body is too big to be held by the medium. That gets at the anger part. So, you know, at the first part of the dissertation, I'm like, let's just go ahead and figure out why I'm angry. And then let's get to the part of how I address that.
all right. So let me ask you this. It's gonna sound funny, but I'm just curious to see where the artist in you goes with this answer. Why are you angry?
Why am I
Or
angry?
why were you angry? Or why are you angry?
Well, why not, right? I mean, I think there's a lot to be angry about. I think that the reason Dr. Bettina Judd has a really great article called Anger as, Anger, it's like methodology. Oh, why am I messing it up now? It's like anger as praxis is a rough translation. There's also the word methodology in there, maybe anger as methodology towards a praxis of something. We love the colons. Yes, thank you, Robert Baxter. Sapphire as praxis toward a methodology of anger. I knew I didn't have the words organized. Shame on me for that. It's a great piece though, and I think that she really captures kind of why we're angry, and also how that anger can work for you. But I mean, I think for myself, like as a Black woman, I'm already seen as angry, angry on arrival, basically. And so I think that for me, it's been really important to find ways to express it, I think, that are unassuming in some ways, and for me personally, like, I've had to work on actually embracing, and even still, like, I would say it's actually really hard to tap into my anger. I was taught by my dad to keep the peace, and just, angry because of racism and sexism and homophobia and all of these things that keep myself and people like me, taxed and down and knees on our necks. I mean, it's just there's a lot of reasons to be angry, but Dr. Judd helped me. I was mad at her in the process, but she helped me tap into how that is a driving force in my work. But again, you wouldn't necessarily catch that with all the glitter and the bright colors and the animation.
Yeah, and there's comics that's the medium you chose to express it because of the visual aid that comics provide for the emotional content behind the visuals.
Yeah, I like the space in between panels. Like the panel itself is violent, but it also points to spaces outside of the panel. And I think it's just a really fruitful site for theorizing what it means to be Black and to be a Black woman. But yeah, as much attention as I give to what's inside the panels, I give to what's what's outside of the panels in the gutters of the comic. But I'll tell you about this book real quick. And so now Witch, the thing about Witch, right, is like the book essentially it asks you to burn it. And so there was like this process, I know, right? There was like this process of really laboring over it and spending all this time and putting all these fine details in there. And then also hitting a point where it was like, the archive is part of the main problem in my studies. Black folks show up in the archive first as numbers, not as people. We show up in ledgers. We show up as weight on a ship. We don't enter the archive as human. And so I have a lot of anger towards the archive. It's like, damn it, my story should be included as well, but then it's also like, go ahead and include me and see what happens to the whole archive, because this book is supposed to burn, and I know that's maybe very incendiary to say amongst a bunch of book lovers, right? Because I love the books too. And so again, this is very theoretical, right? But the book does ask you to strike a match and to light it. So I don't know where I was going.
No. What I got from that is like it definitely, art is spiritual, right? And art is a form of human expression. But you, like you said, you have a very theoretical aspect to your creation. And I'm gonna lead into with the witchcraft part. Where did the inclusion of witchcraft? What was the inspiration behind witchcraft with your expression of the medium?
So, okay, yes. So witchcraft comes directly. It's like my scholarly genealogy. So Dr. Kemi Adeyemi, her dissertation, which she talks about queer Black women lean, a sort of gesture that Black women in Chicago use to fight gentrification, but down to like a dance move. And it's more of like I'm gonna lean out of this dance here. I don't need to participate in that. She drew on that and she kind of labeled it like a twitchy aesthetic. I think that there's a book out there on twitch feminism, but she was also drawing primarily from Dr. Kara Keeling's work, The Witch's Flight, which is about moments of departure and how Black women appear, but their appearance always points to a sort of lack, which I think is what I'm trying to emulate through this book of like, and your collection needs my book really to be a wholesome collection. And yet again, to actually incorporate my book into your collection would the goal is to kind of, again, challenge the whole idea of a collection that you have going, and the threat that continues to pose. So, yeah, so that's where I would say I got the witchcraft part. But what's really interesting is I also feel like the materials just led me to that. And it wasn't until I started to share my work with folks that I started to get pointed to different places where folks have tracked old, or not old, it's still very, very present, but various spiritual practices of the Black diaspora. And in a lot of ways, the work fits right in there with it. Thinking about like, what are they called? Like miniskis, which are like satchels that have like mud and different stones, and they're supposed to have this like protective component to them, and you can like hold it, or I guess maybe a little voodoo to it or something. But and so then I look.
Are you familiar with Ifa? My bad. I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut you off.
No,
Are you familiar with Ifa?
So
Ifa.
Okay.
Yeah, it's another like Western African spiritual. Ifa. You got Look at Me. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Look at Me, which is more of a Brazilian Caribbean practice. Of course, you got voodoo and hoodoo, something like those type practices. That's why I first got when you was explaining your witchcraft part. I was like, oh, okay, indigenous. Okay. So
yeah, flash.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. Yes, and I think that's the great stuff, which again reminds me I'm on the right path, and that like what I'm doing is authentic to me because it's something that I kind of did on my own, and then finding like, oh, there is a home for this This does have a history behind it, but I wasn't really aware of it. But I read Flash of the Spirit. And in that book, the author is describing a bunch of different spiritual practices and philosophies. And I was like, wow, these boxes are like modern day menisques. Like there's dirt in here, there's gems in here. The whole theory around it is like summoning those of us who have been slain, who've been taken too early, those parts of us that we have to put away because they're not safe here in this world. So yeah, and yeah, just like the wax, like the book, there's I say kind of like the book has the waxed thread stitch binding, and that's one wick, and then it meets the candle and the wick coming out of the candle. And I feel like in a lot of ways the candle is all of the things that don't fit into the book, but you kind of need both to like make the magic.
Absolutely. I love candles. Candles are very peaceful, especially when you write. Sidebar, outside of writing comics, have you ever thought about creating a t-shirt company?
T-shirt company.
I'm gonna tell you why. It's
Okay.
very weird. Here's why. Because you've come up with 3, I think would be very dope t-shirts. One on when you did your video presentation, you had something called Magic Momentum Movement. That's a great t-shirt.
Oh,
You had Witchcraft Brew and Brood for all the spiritual people. And I think your number 1 seller will be Angry on Arrival.
Look, and that's from today.
Yes, from today. So if in case it doesn't work out, you're becoming a doctor, you go ahead and make your t-shirts. And yeah, just a little side note. I'll request 10% commission for my services for that, but we'll talk about that later. Anywho, so one last question for you, Meshell. Outside of the doctorate that you're working on, what is the next project that you're creating right now?
Okay, so I've actually been invited to show it's like my first real showing, I guess, in an exhibition at the Jacob Lawrence Gallery for the month of June. So I am gearing up for that and very excited and very nervous about that.
That's great. And is that going to be on your website? Are you going to make announcements and invite people on your website?
Okay, so my website is slightly outdated, but it's not my fault. I put in my updates and I'm waiting for some platform changes to take place. But yeah, I guess I should put that on there. I'm very excited because they're going to help me take some high quality photos of my work. So I have something better than a chair as the background to present.
You should have your t-shirts, the t-shirts on the background. Awesome. So this has been great, and I'm somewhat sad that I have to go. I want to thank Seattle Art Book Fair for allowing me to nerd out with this wonderful panel, and thank you for the opportunity to hear these stories. And I have all your information down, each and every one of you, Chris, Ingrid, Meshell, and I'm gonna send emails, and hopefully you remember me, as the guy from Blue and Gray, Seattle, asking about books. So thank you guys so much. Thank you guys. Thank you, Makeready, for having me. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I have to sign off.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff. You've been an amazing moderator. So yes, Jeff has to take off. We're going to stick around a little while longer. If anybody has any questions for our fantastic presenters in this very first event for Makeready. But yeah, I mean, also Ingrid, Meshell, Chris, if you have questions for each other, I mean, I feel like all y'all talked about such interesting different facets of your work, and you're all working in these kind of different areas, but also united for this love of materials and objects. So yeah, but we'll see if there's any questions here. And feel free to, just turn yourself off mute, or you can raise your hand in under the reactions button in Zoom. It's also Friday night, so maybe people are a little tired.
Chris, you do publishing? How does that work?
Well, it started out just publishing my own stuff, but I've been doing some like open call zines under, it's called Bone Beach Collections. I just put out the third one, which was like the first one where I've been on Instagram, so I can like reach out to more people than just like my close friends in a text message. But I've been doing them every 2 years, so it's kind of a biennial zine. And they've all been centered around like a color. The last one was yellow. I'm not sure what the next one will be, but yeah, most of the publishing has kind of just been random stuff, but I've been trying to like, I don't have a big print space, and I use a lot of recycled and found papers, so my zines are limited on how big but I've been trying to broaden and like print stuff for people who like I'm not a part of the project with, like that would be cool too. But for now, it's been mostly stuff that I've been either I'm friends with them or just some random idea I've been wanting to do. But yeah, lots of zines though.
This is a question for all the panelists. So, everybody's work situations, everybody's, has changed a lot probably in this last year, in quarantine during the pandemic. And I'm just wondering, if this past year, how have, your work habits changed, or your productivity levels, and, the creativity that you might typically have outside of a pandemic year. How has that been affected? And are we coming back to where you might have been, if there had no pandemic happened, or is it going to stay changed well into the future?
Yeah, I mean, for us here, we, my studio, we take client orders. We do, everything from business cards, wedding invitations, fine art prints, fine binding projects. And, a lot of that commission stuff really took a nosedive. We actually saw a mega decrease, of course, in business cards and wedding invitations, but we did have a lot of artists reaching out who were looking for, something other than, maybe their day job that they were furloughed from at the time. So we saw a little sort of spike in those things. But generally commission business was very down. And what it did was it allowed for us to have a lot of time to reflect and sort of reimagine what the rest of our programming could be if we weren't doing commission printing all the time, or if that wasn't our number one main thing that we were doing. And so we've been able to sort of reimagine our studio rental, our classes, our streamline all of those, and make it so that the studio is more accessible. Go through the website and make sure that what we're doing really is coming across how we want it to, and things like that. So it's been for us really a time of reflection and recollection and re-envisioning and reimagining sort of how we can be moving forward, and really focusing on our community and making sure that we were still engaging with them in whatever ways were safe and possible for us. Things are definitely starting to pick back up now. Like all the 2020 weddings are happening in 2021. So it's like, all of that stuff is really flying by it at crazy speed. But I'm grateful for that time to reflect. I know the pandemic has been horrible, and it's not a thing, I would not choose to have that by any stretch, but to have the time to sort of take a step away from some of that commission daily sort of pressure, and really focus on what the business could be doing for building community and engaging with artists and creatives, has we've made really good use of that time.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind was like zines have been like, mailed and shipped all around the world, and kind of like that pre-social media sort of like way of spreading information. And I think it's kind of cool that, I mean, zine fairs and stuff are very cool and happening and like everywhere, and so many people, and like bring so many people together. But it is cool that the postal service was still running throughout this whole situation. And like, I do send zines in the mail all the time anyways, but it's just been like kind of fun to get back in that like pure mailing zine situation, and keeping the post office alive. And like, I don't know, zines and mail art has kind of always like felt like similar to me. And so it's nice even that in this situation, like, I don't know, you can still spread the word or spread the visuals or whatever. But it's definitely changed the thing. And zine fairs were kind of at the height, like 2020, I feel like, with Seattle being the first like art book fair. Sorry, I keep saying zine fairs, but also art book fairs. But yeah, it just felt like there was going to be so much in 2020, especially in this art book zine world, because it is kind of like at a peak, or it felt like it was at a peak. Hope it can get back to that peak. But yeah, it's given a lot of people like different things to look at, taking away their minds from some things. And it'll be interesting to see what the zine fairs are like whenever it's like, it'll probably be even more exciting, which is kind of fun, because we'll all get back together finally. But I do like that zines can kind of exist in this like personal realm where you just mail it and then it just gets in your mailbox or whatever. I don't know. I like that it's still going though.
Chris, I'm kind of curious about like the tactile qualities of the zines that you produce, because I know with Ingrid's work, like it's very hands-on and production oriented and intricate in a lot of ways. And with Meshell's work, it's very personal materials, from glitter to, did you say bubble gum was involved, or some other kind of like very unique ingredients? I'm curious how you approach the materiality of your own work that you produce.
Yeah, so I grew up with hand-me-downs. I grew up like finding stuff, and using that. I grew up in a small town, so like, feel like that kind of relates to my zines. A lot of the paper I use is bought at Goodwill, or like found in the recycling bins at places, or like old books. Like they have like 10 pages in the beginning and back that are just blank, because I guess the layout for them. But I like to use a lot of those like random pages. And like this one book I'm working on right now, it's kind of a composition of all these other old books put in one, and you can see none of the pages are kind of the same. Like this one has, I'm not sure if it was actually from 1919, but even on the paper it just says 1919. And to think that, I don't know, that's 100 years old and it's going to be in this one of one zine. Like that's another thing I like about zines too, is they don't have to be mass produced. And especially with recycled and found paper, it makes it this sort of like special thing that you can't recreate. Maybe if you tried really hard, you could find some of those same books and compile them. But there's something too when you're at Zine Fest and like, that kind of slick magazine that we've all known our whole life, and it's just so clean. And like when you get to Zine Fest and there's zines that like aren't that, and a lot of people have told me too, like, oh wow, this paper is like really cool, or this texture. And I don't know, I love how you can, it doesn't have to be like this flat, smooth surface. It can be all these different things, and reusing stuff from the past that's not being used is definitely like a big thing that I like to do. Yeah, I don't know. I like printing. When you print on an inkjet printer, there's no white ink. And so when you print on these different colored pages, you don't get that white, and you get like the purple background or the beige or whatever. And that's the fun part about zines to me, is like you see it on the screen when you're making it, but then when you put it on these random papers, and I don't know, it just changes. I still keep fantasizing about zines on leaves for some reason. And I was an after school art teacher for these little kids, and they made these drawings once, and it was like a dino holding up a leaf with instructions on how to make their bed. And that still is stuck with me. And I'm like, okay, I need to make a zine on these like huge leaves or something. I don't know. Beyond paper.
That sounds pretty amazing. There is a question from Robert.
Yes. Hi, hello, thank you all. This is fantastic. I have so many like individual selfish questions for each of you, but I'll leave those for like email afterwards. But on the idea of before a book, I'm curious for each of you in your personal practices, if you don't mind sharing, what book projects are sort of in the before stage right now? Like what hasn't really coalesced yet, but is sort of lingering in the clouds for you?
I actually acquired like a huge collection of survey like draft, you know, like the plumbing for like big buildings, you know, like the surveys for those. And I've been printing on those, and I want to do some type of, I don't know if you guys have made X books before, but it's where you just cut up a single piece of paper and fold it until it's a book. So I want to do some type of thing with that, and I've made it, but it's not done. So personal wise, that's trying to figure out how to make an X book do what I want it to do on these huge, you know, big drafts that have big old screen prints on them.
That's kind of something I've been thinking about too. Like when it comes to zines, it's like, okay, what art am I trying to put in that zine, or what paper or paper-like thing is making me want to make that zine? And I like that you're like finding these random papers too and being like, oh, this can be remade into something else. Like that's a big part of that, like before a zine, is sometimes for me it's just finding a paper or seeing like these scraps on the ground. Right now I can't, I guess there's like some like Polaroid scraps and stuff that I'm like planning for, but there's like I have so many projects that are in the works that are in the before the book right now. And sometimes I'll sit on them for 3 years, and sometimes I'll literally like make it in one night. But yeah, there's always so many thoughts.
For me, a couple things come to mind. One is at the start of the pandemic, I started but have not yet finished a series of cootie catchers. I don't know if you know cootie catchers. And this was inspired, I cannot recall who made it, but I did encounter fortune teller little books in my class with Professor Borsick. And so that kind of stuck with me. And I was trying to, it's like all mapped out, right? And like I even made the paper and everything's folded, but it's just like the final inking that I have to draw on. That, yeah, like kind of tracking the spread of like where the first couple of cities that were reported that had COVID cases, and but it's like supposed to be a fortune teller, right? So it's like, what's going to happen? And so there's been a part of me too that's kind of like, well, maybe it's too late to make it. And I ran into some issues with like the way that I had done the paper there, it would kind of leave a little bit of a residue on your fingers, which then I was like, but it's cootie catchers, so maybe you got the cooties, like that's what's, you know. But so I've put that one on hold. There's another project that I have been thinking on, and I appreciate this question too, because I just appreciate like getting to think about that. I have an old from like maybe the first grade. I don't know if you all did this in school, but everybody like contributes a page and then they bind it into like a book. And so it was based off of a book that we had read, which was called Look Like Spilt Milk. And it's like a bunch of, it's about clouds and how they take different shapes, but one of them looks like spilled milk. And then, you know, we all tore paper and made it look like, you know, a cloud / spilled milk. What is it? But yeah, I wanted to like kind of disassemble that book and make it into something new. My mom had sent me, my grandma had passed away and she collected cookie jars, and my mom had a bunch of them. And she had one that's this like milk jug, but it's an Oreo cookie jar. So then there's like all these Oreos on it. It's just like very, it's like white, blue, and black are the colors. And then she sent it to me instead of bringing it to me, and it got to me broken. And I was like, this is my relationship with my mother, like, right? So I was like, something like Mother's Milk, gotta make a new book, tracking all that somehow, so I kept the cookie jar, and I, you know, would like to use it in some way. So maybe mixing that with but I don't know how it all come together. I gotta get the degree first.
Ingrid, I have a question for you that kind of spins off this, where I imagine sometimes you're working with artists that have an idea for a book, like Meshell's Spilled Milk, the broken pieces, and it's kind of like an unformed, nebulous idea. And maybe they're talking to you about like, oh, I want to turn this into a book, into a publication. How does the conversation work, like back and forth, as far as you suggesting like, you know, what's practical or realistic, or what's going to cost like an arm and a leg to actually create? How do you approach that kind of conversation?
Definitely. For me, a very important part of that conversation is who is the intended audience of this book? Is this a book? Is this an object? You know, is this something where you want your message to get into hundreds and thousands of people's hands? Or is this a book where you want whoever does end up with the privilege of owning it to really cherish it and hold it dear, and possibly, you know, have it for future generations and those types of things. So that part of the conversation is one that often people haven't necessarily taken time to consider when we do have that conversation. And it's a really important one. It's totally on the sort of more pragmatic, less fun end of, you know, creating. But I think when you keep sort of in mind, you know, do I want my ideas to reach, you know, hundreds and thousands of people at a very accessible sort of price point? Because, you know, we do need to ideally find ways to be compensated for our work and our effort. Then, you know, what form then will make it able to do that, you know, and is that a physical book? Is that, you know, an e-publishing? Is that a website? You know, is that Instagram persona? There's lots of different ways to get ideas out there in sort of ways that I guess draw on sort of the origin of book and narrative sequence that don't necessarily have to be a handcrafted physical artist book. Now, I love for everybody to just make the fanciest, highest end artists books, because I love seeing the ways in which people's creativity and individual sort of histories and craftsmanship can come into the medium and really push it forward. I mean, the goal for existent books is to stimulate the evolution of the medium and to keep it relevant. The same way that, you know, when artists from outside of printmaking come into printmaking, they push printmakers to do different things because they want a blue speck right there. And so the conversation really, in a lot of ways, can start with that, you know, how many hands does this need to end up in? Whose hands does this need to end up in for you to feel satisfied with this project? You know, how do you want this to be interpreted? And oftentimes, you know, it's a couple different forms. There's a more simple edition that gets published in a larger number, and there's a special edition that gets published in a smaller number and is done in a way that's maybe more expensive to produce. But yeah, that's one of those conversations that takes a long time. And a lot of times the the objectness, when working with artists specifically, like the objectness of the book is very important. So ensuring that, you know, that craftsmanship and the way that that book is presented on a shelf is very, very important. And the cost is maybe less of a concern. So.
Well, are there any other questions from the crowd here? Or questions for each other from the panelists? Well, it's yeah, it's Friday, and so we don't want to keep folks on Zoom longer than they need to be. So thank you so much for attending. Yeah, being part of this very first weekend of Makeready, the very first event. We hope you'll come back and join us for all the other events this weekend. Studio events tomorrow, a workshop, and also office hours. And then we'll do it all again next weekend with Robert, actually, Robert Baxter, who will be moderating that conversation on Friday night. But thank you once again to these fantastic panelists. I've so enjoyed hearing about each one of your practices. Meshell, Chris, Ingrid, super appreciate it. So, but thank you everybody and have a fantastic Friday night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sticking with it and putting this together. I cannot even imagine being, you know, in the place where you're forced to postpone for 2 years. So I really appreciate y'all sticking with it. And I can't wait to hopefully see y'all in Seattle next year.
Yeah.
I'll be following along all month this month.
Oh, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we are super stoked to hear about all of your book fairs that you're organizing. So that was really lovely to hear about tonight as well. So yeah. Thank you.
And
Yeah,
thank you
thanks for having us. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say thanks for having us, and hopefully there won't be another rain check.
Oh my gosh, right. And thanks to Jeffrey too, who had to leave unexpectedly. But as Jamie said, we'll be back for more tomorrow. I'm going to put the schedule up in case you need to see it again, but I'm sure everyone's seen plenty on our website and posts and things like that. So thanks to everybody for attending tonight, and we will see you maybe tomorrow.
Bye.